This is Where Am I? A short story by Songbird. Sand. All she could see was sand. Sand in all directions. It was in her hair, on her clothes, in her eyes. It was on the ground and heavy on the dry, blistering wind that slithered across the parched, flat land like a serpent desperately searching out its next victim. As she blinked, her dry, red-rimmed eyes almost seemed to sigh over what little moisture was offered by such a natural act. Blinking against the noonday sun which beat down mercilessly upon her from high overhead, miles upon miles of dry sagebrush plants suddenly loomed all around her. Silent sentinels left to guard the desolate place and the lost soul that now wandered there. As the heat pricked at even the back of her neck and her knees, she picked a direction and started walking, figuring that anywhere was better than nowhere. As she trudged on through the semi-firm sand, only occasionally stumbling through a soft patch, her mind was strangely numb, silent. After a time she lifted her head, and she suddenly spotted it in the distance, a 2-lane highway running left to right as far as she could see, perhaps 100 feet ahead, maybe a bit more. But it wasn't so much the highway that caught her eye, it was what was on the highway, or rather, who. A young woman stood on the dotted line, her back to the girl in the desert. She didn't move a muscle, just standing, perhaps staring off into the distance beyond. A horn suddenly sounded from off to the right, drawing Desert Girl's eyes. It was a diesel, hauling 3 trailers behind it. From the way it was hauling, those trailers were far from empty. No sound of anything from the truck slowing down. All that weight was barreling straight for the girl standing in the middle of the highway, reminding Desert of a bowling alley with 1 pin left standing, facing the rolling bowling ball. Returning her eyes to the girl on the road, Desert opened her mouth, trying to call to her, to warn her, but it was no use. Her throat was as cracked and parched as the landscape. Feeling desperate as the truck drew closer, Desert broke into a run, saying a silent prayer as she beelined for the highway girl. But it was too late. The sound of the young woman's body hitting the grill nearly made Desert's heart stop, even as her legs went into automatic pilot and kept running. The truck didn't even slow down, disappearing quickly over the horizon as Desert finally reached the blacktop of the highway, her eyes glued on the girl who lay face down across its surface. Her heartbeat pounding in her ears, Desert crossed to the girl, and kneeling carefully beside her, she reached out to curve her hand carefully under the girl's arm. Then, taking a deep breath, she rolled her over in one swift move. Then she screamed. When she opened her eyes again, the sun was setting, and as she forced herself up into a seated position, she realized that she had passed out in the sand embankment beside the highway. Her back was still turned on what she desperately feared facing again. Closing her eyes as though she faced it still, she swallowed over the lump in her throat, and turning, she looked back to the road. It was gone. No drag marks, no blood, no hair. There was not a single sign to show that a body had lain there. And yet it had. Or had it? No, she reasoned, she had seen it. It had been right there. She still remembered its hair, its face, its lifeless eyes staring upward, unblinking, unseeing. How could she ever forget them? She'd seen the same person every time she'd looked into a mirror. But how could it have been? She had no twin. She was alive, of both she was certain. After all, it wasn't her reality she was doubting as she stood there, staring down at the spot where the body should have been but wasn't. It was her sanity. Next scene. She couldn't remember how long she stood there, staring down at the asphalt as though half expecting it to open up and swallow her. Considering the days she'd been having, she wouldn't have been surprised if it did. She might even willingly jump in head first. But the asphalt never opened up, and the sky never fell, so finally she crossed the highway without really seeing it anymore, her bleary eyes distant, haunted still by the sight of her body lying on the dotted line as she wandered aimlessly onward through the sand, a path which led her ever closer to the mountains in the distance. That's the end of the short story excerpt, Where Am I? By avsongbird. I wanted to share that one with you guys. And I wanted to find out if this is one that you guys would like me to write more of, or if you guys think this one isn't pursuing, because believe it or not, the idea for this one came years ago. I've always kind of had nightmares. You know, part of what feeds a bunch of my scary stories are my nightmares, because I have god-awful nightmares. And no, it's not related to my love of scary movies. The nightmares came first, and I figured, hell, if I'm going to have nightmares, I might as well watch the scary movies, right? I'm going to have them anyway. Hell. But this one, yeah, I had a nightmare years ago of exactly what happened in that scene. And people always say, you know, if you see yourself die in a dream, you know, you're not supposed to be able to survive it. But yeah, that dream unsettled me, you know. Seeing myself laying on the highway, you know, going up and rolling it over, and I'm going, part of me wanted to go and see what that dream meant, and the other part of me is going, nah, it's just a movie. It's just a dream. Let it go. Doesn't mean anything. It's just there and gone, you know. Roll credits. It's over, you know. But if you guys liked that story, and if you found it haunting, or if you just enjoyed it and you're curious, let me know if you'd like me to continue this one. So, yeah, that was Where Am I by avsongbird, and I hope you enjoyed it. Night, guys.